Victory Studios in downtown Little Rock, this is Capitol View.
Hello, everybody, and good Sunday morning. Certainly hope your Sunday is getting off to a great start. Welcome to Capitol View. I'm Bob Clausen. Right out of the gate, want to check in with our Washington correspondent, Jesse Tenor, find out what's been going on in the nation's capital that directly affects us here in the capital city, as well as the entire state of Arkansas. Jess, how are you?
Hey, Bob, doing well. Thanks for having me back.
All right. Well, busy week as usual, although it seems not as busy as it's been in the past, which is a good thing. We'll touch on some things that came up this week in just a minute. But first, want to get something on that's been really talked about quite a bit, and that is to do with autism in children. In recent years, in past years, it's been concerned that vaccinations related to autism. However, some physicians saying studies actually show that there are more occurrences or diagnoses of autism, kids in the autism spectrum, because physicians can now better diagnose it. And there are some things that are in play right now about the Autism Cares Act that's being run through Congress up there. Tell us about that and what's developed this week.
Yeah, Bob, so even 20, 30 years ago, autism was considered a rare disease. And as far as that goes, that means doctors were saying about 1 in 10,000 kids were diagnosed with some sort of autism spectrum disorder. Now, because they're able to diagnose it, like you said, they're now calling it a common disorder. They now say 1 in 60 children have ASD. And people are pointing mostly to the Autism Cares Act for providing this research, allowing doctors to make these diagnoses. So it was first implemented back in 2000, and it essentially just coordinates and expands efforts that were already happening at the federal level to fund research and make sure that these doctors have better training from urban to rural areas. And what's happening right now is that this funding expires at the end of the month, and Congress still isn't back. They've been on recess, and they get back next week. And so almost every attorney general in the country sent a letter urging Congress to pass it once they are back because of this approaching deadline, and they know that the effect that it's been able to have on children and adults across the country. And so they've been saying that Congress can't wait, they can't let this expire because of all the innovations that have been able to come from this. And they said that even though we have been able to even make it from a rare to a common disease, at least consider it that, in the past several decades, there's still a long way to go as far as treatment in rural areas. That's one of the main things. And then also making sure that when these kids turn into adults, that there's education opportunities for them, job opportunities for them, and also housing. I think that that's something that maybe a lot of people wouldn't think about.
Yeah, and I want to put up, we just briefly put up a response from Arkansas Attorney General Leslie Rutledge. As you mentioned, many attorney generals sending this in, saying more research and services are necessary to address the needs of our rapidly increasing population of Americans on the autism spectrum. Congress coming back, what's the talk up there? I mean, are they going to act quickly on this? Is there any sort of delay, any concern?
And talking about money, you kind of never know what's going to happen, but this is something that does have broad bipartisan support, and a lot of policy groups that are watching this very closely are optimistic that this will pass. It's just kind of one of those things that Congress gets back. There's a lot on their plate, a lot that they have to do, a lot of big issues that they're going to have to try to tackle right away, that they have pressure on to tackle right away: guns, health care, just to name a couple. And so they're just hoping that they prioritize this and get this done so people aren't left hanging.
Still on topic of vaccinations, talking about measles this time. And this is interesting, too, because for a long time, measles has more or less been eradicated in the United States and eliminated measles, basically. But the CDC saying the country is now just basically weeks away from losing that status because of all these outbreaks that we've been reporting on, almost like clusters of measles outbreaks from one part of the state or one part of the country. Another thing that the Congress have to do is kind of get behind this, but also the call going out to make sure parents are vaccinating their children. Is that big of an issue up there?
Yeah, that continues to be a big issue among a lot of health experts here in Washington. I know that, like you mentioned, the CDC, the National Institutes of Health, is looking very closely at this as well. They are all kind of honing in on these weeks after Labor Day because that's when every student across the country is back at school. And so they said that the first outbreak, it really kind of began in September of last year. It continued to increase and then kind of plateaued over the summer. And they were saying that's because kids aren't around a bunch of other kids because of summer break. And so they were saying that in these next couple weeks, with all of them being back to school, all of them being in those classrooms together, tight-knit, that there really is a chance that we could see the United States lose the elimination status. And I think just last week there was 4 European countries that lost it because of outbreaks. And so it is something that's continuing to happen. I know that in Congress, the anti-vaccination debate has been very heated, even just as of this year. Earlier this year, what was kind of interesting is there was a teenager who testified in front of Congress. His parents were anti-vaccination advocates, but he said once he kind of learned more about it, that he actually went and got all of the vaccinations that he had missed out on himself because he thought that the evidence pointed more toward that way. And so this will definitely be something we continue to see, and we could even see developments on this within the next week or so.
Yeah, it's one of those things. Education, education, education when it comes to anything health related when it concerns vaccines and, of course, your kids. The opioid addiction, something that has been raging, of course, here in Arkansas and across the country, and a lot of efforts underway to try to curb that, bring it down. A lot of things in play here. But then we think about the HIV epidemic in the state, HIV and AIDS. Kind of, it seems that for the most part, I think there's kind of a feeling out there that there's been a handle on this and it's taken care of. But this is still something, a war, a health, front that's still being fought vigorously. And President Trump now taking action on the HIV front.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Bob, President Trump earlier this year in his State of the Union address, he announced his plan to essentially eliminate HIV by 2030. And as part of his plan, it outlined counties across the country and also 7 states where there was kind of the most risk in rural areas. And Arkansas was actually one of them for being at risk for HIV. And I don't know if many people think about these 2 epidemics of HIV and the opioid crisis going hand in hand, but experts here have been saying, how can they not? As soon as you start talking about people using needles, then, as part of the opioid crisis, then we have to talk about potential HIV outbreaks. And so the CDC has identified 220 counties across the country, and there's 2 in Arkansas, Sharp and Lawrence counties, where we could see some sort of HIV outbreak because of the way that the opioid crisis has been kind of manifesting there. And so that'll be something else to monitor, too, in Arkansas.
It is interesting that you point out the 2. You basically one leads to the other or vice versa with that type of thing. So it's got to be something that's a 2-front war being waged on that. A war that we all deal with, Jesse, these robocalls that we constantly get. And it's one of those things, too. They get you right exactly when you don't want them, early in the morning, late at night, the middle of the afternoon. You tend to pick them up. You find out this is something that you don't want to hear. Where are we hearing on some legislation that's being put in place to try to get these things to stop, or at least get some other corporations involved where we're not getting these robocalls anymore?
Yeah, Bob, so this is where we see attorneys general kind of step up again. So unlike the Autism Cares Act, where they can't do anything to make sure that the funding is in place except for to urge Congress, attorneys general, every attorney general in the country signed on to this, saying Congress cannot get this legislation passed right now. It's stalled, so why don't we forge agreements with these phone companies? And that's exactly what they did. Every attorney general in the country was able to come to agreement with about 12 phone companies, a dozen phone companies, on these 8 policies that essentially say, let's crack down on robocalls, let's make it easier for attorneys general to prosecute them, and let's also make it so that phone companies can track them at no cost to their customers. And so we could see some movement on that pretty soon. They were wanting to get this in place kind of as soon as possible because robocalls are the calls that these attorneys general's offices also get the most calls about.
Jess, a busy week, no doubt. You know, you got another week till Congress gets back in, and then things are going to hit the ground running. I noticed the weather behind you. Is that portions of Hurricane Dorian?
Maybe a little bit. Right now it's a screen.
Oh, okay.
So we'll say that.
Looked like a little active weather.
That's a little TV magic for all of you.
That's what it is. All right, Jess, thanks very much. Appreciate it. Have a great busy week. Update us when you can. Well, coming up after a quick break, Walmart changes their gun policy and lawmakers weighing in the national gun debate. You're watching Capitol View on this Sunday morning.
Finding the right furniture for your home may take a little faith. You'll find unbelievable deals at Faith Furniture in North Little Rock. Like a two-piece sectional or sofa love, a marble coffee table, 2 end tables, and a free rug, only $650. So have a little faith and come see for yourself. Faith Furniture in North Little Rock.
My feet hurt so bad in the morning, I couldn't even put my feet on the floor. So I had to start engineering my own arch support. So I got that, then I put this in there, this one. Finally, before I added another one of these in, I went to Good Feet, and they gave me this. So I built all this together to engineer a solution to my pain. And if I'd have just gone to Good Feet, I'd have been better off in the first place.
Good Feet Arch Supports, engineered for pain relief, personally fitted for you.
Here's your Buick, sir. Actually, that's my Buick.
How are we going to fit in your mom's Buick?
Easy.
I like that new Buick.
Me too.
I was actually talking about that Buick.
I knew that.
Did you?
Buick's fresh new lineup is full of surprises. Kick off football season with Buick. Get 16% below MSRP on most 2019 Buick Encore models. Plus, well-qualified buyers get 3.8% APR financing for 72 months.
Sold it. Perry County Absolute Development Land Auction. Wednesday, September 18th at 3 p.m. 80 newly surveyed acres 4 miles west of the Toadsuck Bridge. Just off Highway 60 in Bigelow, Arkansas. Offering 4 20-acre level tracts and combinations. And every tract is selling regardless of price to the highest bidder. Go to WilsonAuctioneers.com.
Sold it. Hi folks, Bart Sherwood with Sherwood Tractor. My grandson Oliver and I love to ride heavy-duty horses, side-by-sides, and tractors. If you want heavy-duty, buy a Mahindra, the #1 selling tractor in the world. We have all sizes of Mahindra tractors, implements, and side-by-sides. What's in your barn?
You're watching Capitol View, Sunday morning talk focused on the political scene in Arkansas.
This week, major retailers changed their gun carry and ammo policies to try to fight mass shootings. Still a top discussion, though, across the nation. Here to talk about this and more, State Senator Joyce Elliott and State Senator Bob Ballinger. Thank you very much for joining us, you guys. I want to talk about Walmart's decision this week to limit gun and ammo sales. More companies changing their gun policies. Walgreens, Wedgman's Food Markets, CVS, asking customers to now no longer carry firearms in their stores. Earlier this week, both Walmart and Kroger said they would be asking shoppers to stop openly carrying firearms in stores across the country. And Bob, real quick, you sent out a tweet rather pointed saying this week, if we are to succeed in advancing the cause of freedom and free markets, the business must stand shoulder to shoulder with those fighting for liberty. The left-wing ideologues who oppose gun rights are the same ones who seek to tax and regulate Walmart out of existence. I would say you disagree with that decision.
I would say that I disagree with that decision. Although I would say that I support their private organization. They have the right to make that choice. But I would say it's a bad choice. Essentially, what they're going to do is they're going to make it more inconvenient for good guys, for my constituents who are out there looking for ammunition, and make it a little harder, especially in rural Arkansas, where a lot of times Walmart is pretty much the only choice for going and buying ammunition, and yet the bad guys are going to be able to go and find guns, and mass shootings are a problem, right? I mean, it's very clearly we have more than 20 people were killed on one weekend, a couple of weekends ago, which is never acceptable. But the truth is that's not how most of the crime is occurring. That's not how most of the murders are happening. And so it's not, it isn't going to change things when people can go buy ammunition in other locations. And in particular, what you're talking about is taking away ammunitions that are for probably the most popular rifle in the country, which are used for things like killing hogs and killing varmints and other things like that. That's how most of my constituents use that ammunition, or just for going out and sport shooting.
Your response to Walmart's decision and others?
Well, I was very pleased with Walmart making this decision, because it is the case, I think, that we have to balance what we're talking about with the Second Amendment. And to suggest that I think that this is a bad decision means that we think we can't get this ammo anyplace else, and actually we can. And I've always criticized Walmart for going into small towns and ruining small town Arkansas. Here's an opportunity for somebody else to take up that mantle and grow a small business. It is not in the interest of anybody, I think, for us not to be serious about doing something about gun violence, no matter what those guns are used for. The one thing we know is that they are those guns and the ammo are the favorite kind of gun people like to use when they are going to create a massacre. And I think we can be thoughtful about this, and we don't have to be upset with each other. And we can reckon, I think, that people's lives, in some cases, mean more than my right to have something that I want. And to me, this is clear cut. And I applaud Walmart for making this decision. I think it's a good one. It's a good one on balance. And that's where we ought to be when we start talking about Amendment 2.
When we talk about balance, and you guys are both on opposing sides from time to time, but you're both on some legislation together.
We are.
Where is the come together on this issue of, when people talk about the assault-style weapons ban or large capacity magazines, things like that? Where is the come together on this? Because there seems to be so much distance, not only in the federal but the state level.
I think the come together is something we've never done before. We just talk past each other. There needs to be a time where people actually do what Beto O'Rourke did when he was here, no matter what his policies are. He went and talked to people who are on the other side of his philosophy in this whole thing. I think that's something we need to do, because the people who have a different position from what I have are not bad people. I'm not bad because I have a different position, but we don't ever get together and say, all of us appreciate the Second Amendment. And to say we don't, I think is just wrong. But the Second Amendment is no more pure than any other amendment. So we have to find that place where both sides can get away from their purity test. And we have never bothered to do that. And Bob, you and I can get past purity.
Yeah, and we have on legislation.
Yes.
I think you look at the legislation that we worked together on, though. What ends up happening is we look at what the goal is, and then we come together on the goal. And I think that something you have with a fundamental disagreement that you have when it comes to firearms legislation is, I would love to see mass shootings stopped, right? I think that it's a sad situation that it seems to be more common, even if has a lot to do with media and availability of information or whatever else. It doesn't matter. Those 20 people are dead. And so I'd like to see that stopped. So the goal that Joyce and I, Senator Elliott and I would have 100% agreement on would be to try to make it where those people aren't dead. Those children, those women, those men aren't, those brothers, sisters, moms aren't gone. But the problem is the means to get to the end. So that's where we end up getting on the opposite side. One is I think that you have a natural right to protect yourself with firearms. And so that is something that isn't easy to compromise. The other thing is, I think that actually it would have zero impact on if you focus on the guns and attacking the guns and banning the guns and limiting to sell the guns. I think that, one, is you're in violation of the Constitution, but two, I don't think you're actually fixing the problem, because I think truly the bad guys out there are not going to follow the law.
But this is where we are, Bob. We are not trying to fix the problem. We're just talking about it, because it takes collaboration. Not compromise, collaboration, where we sit down, honor each other's thoughts, and recognize that we can find a way out of this. And it seems for a lot of people, especially NRA, it's something to use as a wedge issue, and it pulls people apart. And I think we have to rise above that And if we're going to be, especially as legislators, we have an obligation to do that, and not just keep on talking past each other.
The NRA is just a group of citizens who care a lot about their fundamental constitutional and alienable rights.
And everybody else does too now.
Sure, and so, but that's the thing is that's why. So the best analogy I can think of is that if somebody has a terrible infection and so they have a fever. Well, so if you take Tylenol, then you can suppress the fever, but the terrible infection is not being taken care of. And I think that's sort of what's happening is that the problem is not the guns. The problem are the individuals who think that it's okay to go out and kill people. I mean, truly the worst mass slaughter that ever happened in American history was done with explosives in a school. And so, I mean, the truth is the problem is not the firearm. The problem is, why is it that our society are creating individuals that thinks it's okay to go out, that has lost that innate natural idea that says I can't go out and kill my fellow man, right? So to me, what we're doing is we're looking at it's almost like a scapegoat. We're setting something up to attack it rather than actually getting to the meat of the problem. And so I think the debate about guns can actually be detrimental to really fixing the problem, which is why in our society are we have individuals that when they have a problem, they think it's okay to go out and kill as many people as they possibly can.
In essence, it's not the hardware as much as the software we need to be focusing on, i.e. mental health, things of that nature. Guys, I want to thank you very much for your time. As always, a pleasure.
You're welcome.
We're back right after this.
Ground level ozone causes eye and throat irritation. Walking to work causes a total lack of stress about parallel parking. Take action against ozone, today and every day.
First 6-function multi-pro tailgate, available only on the next generation GMC Sierra. Step up to GMC and get over $10,000 total value on this next generation Sierra. Tailgate like a pro. GMC.
Independence County Absolute Real Estate Auction, Wednesday, September 25th at 3 p.m. at 315 Mose Mountain Road, just west of Batesville, with 240 total acres and a beautiful custom home built by J.B. Henley in 1997 with 4,000 square feet, 5 bedrooms, 5 bathrooms, sitting on 40 acres. Offered separately and in combination with 120 acres and 80 acres of Bermuda pasture and mature timber. And every track is selling regardless of price. Go to wilsonauctioneers.com.
Sold it. Ashley Home Store's Labor Day sale is going on now. Save big on living room, dining room, bedroom sets, and so much more. For a limited time only, save up to 30% or get 0% interest for 6 whole years. Whether you're updating one room or your entire home, find styles that fit your look and budget. The best Labor Day furniture deals are only available at America's #1 furniture and mattress store. Ashley Home Store, exit 123 off I-30 in Bryant. This is home.
For most of the people that walk in our store, it's been an ongoing, non-stop issue, and they're finally walking into the Good Feet store. Okay, the guy that came into my store last year that has had plantar fasciitis for 30 years. I looked at him, I said, "Are you kidding me? I've been here for 14. Where have you been?" I helped relieve a problem that's plagued him for 30 years. I mean, how do you not go home and talk about that?
See for yourself with a free personalized arch support fitting at the Good Feet store.
You're watching Capitol View, Sunday morning talk focused on the political scene in Arkansas.
Last month, California passed a new law changing the legal standard for when law enforcement officers can use lethal force. Civil rights groups say that should be a national standard, but Washington correspondent Alexander Limon reports the National Sheriff's Association worries the move will put officers and communities at risk.
In a split second, an officer's going to have to make the decision.
Jonathan Thompson, the executive director of the National Sheriff's Association, says it can cost lives when law enforcement spends time second-guessing a decision.
Do I pull my gun and do I pull the trigger and protect those behind me, or do I let it sit and potentially let those behind me die? It's that fast.
California's new law changes the legal standard for using lethal force from when reasonable to when necessary. Now there's talk that California's law could spark changes nationwide.
It's very hopeful that this will lead a domino effect across the country. Obviously, it's incredibly hard. This was the byproduct of at least several years worth of work.
Complete national data on police use of force isn't easy to find. The FBI didn't start tracking police shootings until this year. And even now, law enforcement agencies aren't required to submit their data. But the Washington Post documented nearly 1,000 deadly police shootings in 2018 and more than 600 so far this year. Justin Mazzola with Amnesty International says officers should stop to think before pulling the trigger, and says shootings like the Stephon Clark case in Sacramento that sparked California's new law disproportionately affect communities of color.
I hope that there aren't 50 similar cases or 49 similar cases across the country to make each state have to do this.
In Washington, Alexandra Limon.
The trade war with China appears to be taking its toll on the hiring market. U.S. employers added 130,000 jobs in August, 25,000 of them temporary census workers. Economists call the 130,000 total, while it seems large, they call it modest. Finding the president's trade war with China and global economic weakness may be to blame for a hiring slowdown. The unemployment rate remains 3.7%, near the lowest level in 5 decades. Wrapping up with good news there on the employment front. A workshop aimed at helping kids find real job opportunities is getting an upgrade. Be Pro, Be Proud 2.0 gives students hands-on experience in construction, manufacturing, and transportation careers. It's an upgrade from workshop that started in 2016. This one features 13 highly interactive stations, even uses virtual reality systems.
Not everybody is going to go to college. Not everybody is going to get a 4-year degree, and they need to see options that they can have and that has meaning and dignity and honor and that they can provide for a family.
The original mobile workshop has made stops in 250 cities across the state. We are back to wrap things up right after this. You're watching Capitol View on this Sunday morning.
The Car Hop Classic for just $2.99 is the perfect 1-2 punch of flavor and value.
Time that.
You need a trainer to help you eat the burger?
Hey, stay out of this.
Don't get in my head, man. There's barely room for me in there.
Hurry in and try quarter-pound double cheeseburger or 6-inch Philly plus tots for $2.99.
At the Furniture Row Labor Day sale, the more you buy, the more you save.
I saved $100. You saved $200.
Save $100 for every $1,000 you spend store-wide. Save on living, dining, bedroom, and mattresses.
We saved $200.
Plus, get no interest financing until January 2024. Buy more, save more. Now at the Labor Day sale at Furniture Row.
Sonic's got all my fair faves.
Cheddar peppers, 99-cent corn dogs, Oreo a la mode.
But there's no chicken on the Fair Faves menu, right?
No. Why do you ask?
No reason.
You're safe. Hurry in. Fair Faves start at 99 cents and order ahead for happy hour anytime.
You're watching Capitol View, Sunday morning talk focused on the political scene in Arkansas.
That is it for today's show. And don't forget, you can now take Capitol View on the go. Download the Capitol View podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We're back with an all-new Capitol View next week. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, everybody.
Only 2 teams have won it all 6 times, and they're going head-to-head. Steelers, Patriots, all eyes on the premiere of Sunday Night Football.
A new Ninja Warrior will be crowned! Fight through it!
This is what I trained for.
It's my moment. The best group of ninjas we've ever had. Hit that buzzer, he's got it!
American Ninja Warrior, Monday on NBC.
Sold it.
Perry County Absolute Development Land Auction, Wednesday, September 18th at 3 p.m. 80 newly surveyed acres 4 miles west of the Toadsuck Bridge, just off Highway 60 in Bigelow, Arkansas. Offering 4 20-acre level tracts and combinations. And every tract is selling regardless of price to the highest bidder. Go to Wilson Auctioneers.